So today what we're here to talk about is helping to get students to college. So this is a K-12 focused workshop. We are very happy to have Mr. Adam A. Smith here, and he is going to introduce his guest as well. Just a little bit of information about Adam. He's a first generation college grad who has dedicated his almost 3 decade career to ensuring college access and success for all Americans. So he brings a lot of that emotional background and motivation to what he does. And the more I speak to him, the more I understand that it's a work of passion more than anything else. And so you're really going to get a feel for that today. And the few times I've met Christine already, you're also going to appreciate hearing from her. So I'm going to let them go ahead and take the show over. And if there's any questions, go ahead and feel free to post them in chat. We'll address them as they come up. And again, thank you everybody for attending. Adam, your show.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thank you, guys. Thanks to Infobase for this opportunity. We're really looking forward to the partnership. Thank you all for being here. We know there's plenty of other things in this virtual world tugging at you and going on with your lives, from virtual learning for your kids. And most of us are virtual right now in one way, shape, or form. While I'm introducing my colleague, Christine Rose, please take a second and put in the chat where you're coming from. Where you currently are in the country, right? Where you physically are located. It's always great to see the proximity and where people are, just to create kind of a sense of connection and a sense of relationship, and in our new normal world, which is really, really important. So like Greg said, Adam Smith, I live in Knoxville, Tennessee right now. And I work for a university called Metropolitan State University in Minneapolis, St. Paul, which is my hometown. And I've spent 2 or 3 decades. I'm an old pawpaw, so I've spent a long time in higher ed in various roles, focused on college access, as well as some time working on citywide education initiatives in Rockford, Illinois. So this presentation, along with the next one, which is coming up same time next week, where we'll have 4 or 5, 6 maybe, students from various universities who are going to talk to you next week at the same time about what they wish in a real conversation, what they wish they knew in high school. So now looking back, what they wish their guidance counselors, their parents, their principals, their teachers would have told them now that they are currently in college. So make sure, I look forward to seeing y'all next week for that seminar as well. It's going to be far less of me talking, which is not as fun, and far more hearing from young people from the University of Alabama, the University of Tennessee, Fisk University in Nashville, the University of Kentucky, Metropolitan State, and a couple more. So it'll be a really good group of young people from all around the country talking about their current experiences and realities in college and what they wish they knew when they were in high school, or that their educators or their coaches around them taught them or talked about to really prepare them for those experiences. So that'll happen next week. So we created some time. Thank you all for putting where you are in the chat. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Christine Rose. Christine and I have been together and known each other, oh my goodness gracious. Now it's almost 9 or 10 years. Christine is at the University of Akron in Ohio. She still does not claim Ohio. Her Facebook always has her from Miami, Florida. So Christine is from Miami, and she will tell you all about herself. She does fantastic work with students in Northeast Ohio that are current college students, and getting them not only to get a degree, but to get one of those high-paying, high-impact STEM degrees. So Christine, do you want to introduce yourself and take us forward?
Yes, thank you, Adam. So again, it's Christine Fabre Rose. I am originally from Colombia, South America, and moved to Miami, Florida when I was 10 years old. Yes, I currently reside in Akron, Ohio. I will not claim Ohio. I still have a 305 area code on my phone. But my background's in social work, so I went to undergrad for social work as well as my master's. I am very passionate about working with minority students, especially our Latinx students and LGBT students. So that's a little bit of my passions right now. And also working with women, as I have 2 daughters, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. So talking a little bit about, online learning and things like that. I've been dealing with that since March. I actually come to the office to escape them so that I can get some work done. So we'll definitely talk a little bit about that and getting your students obviously through high school and then getting them to college right now in these crazy times that we live in. So next slide, I guess, Adam. So with my background in social work, we just wanted to say thank you, and we wanted to acknowledge you for creating time and space and being here with us today. So here you see the little, you know, when you go on the airplane and they're talking to you, if the cabin pressure goes off, make sure to put the mask on yourself before others. This is very important right now. We are living in a very tumultuous time in our country and in our world and our history. So we wanted to acknowledge you and just take some time for you guys to check in with yourselves. And maybe in the chat box, if you want, you can just, with the events that just happened last week in our nation, how are you doing as caretakers, as teachers, as family members? You know, maybe in a little chat box, write a word on how you're doing or an emoji, see how you're doing, or in your notes, just check in with yourself. Right before we get into this, Adam and I are very touchy-feely. We like to talk about how we're doing as people because it's important to, thank you, stress, praying a lot. I agree 100%. My 3-year-old is at home with me, and I just had a day yesterday. It was just one of those days where she was just checking in with me every 5 minutes. And I'm like, honey, I cannot talk to you right now. I'm trying to talk to my students and my scholars. It's the first week of the semester. So we just wanted to acknowledge you guys and say thank you. And we're all in this together. We, again, do not know what's going on in the world. We do not know what's going on with our country, but we are all in this together, and we're here to support and love each other. So stressed, yes, we are stressed. Praying, make sure that you guys are taking care of yourselves and of each other, and obviously of your students and your incoming students, both in high school and then to college. Anxious for the future, tired, drained. Yes, yes. We're going to talk a little bit about that towards the end of the new normal that we're in right now and how we can all work together to work with our students to help them get to that next step. So.
Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you for being here and for doing that. The one thing I want to make sure, and Christine does a great job with this, just acknowledging that so much of our work is about, I told my team the other day, because we're having some check-ins campus-wide for students as a result of the essentially the attack on the Capitol and just how scary that is in light of COVID-19 and just everything that's going on. And I think sometimes we forget, and we are so concerned with our students, whether they're in elementary school, whether they're in high school, middle school, or in college, we're so concerned about them, but we forget that we are the pilots that fly the airplane that they're passengers on, right? And I would not want my children or anyone I loved or to be on a plane that a pilot was not practicing self-care. So it's really important to create that space. Thank you all so much for putting your feelings and your thoughts in there. It also creates a connection between us, right? Christine's going to talk about the new normal, but we need to, and I'm sure y'all did this through your holiday season. There were times that you had, our daughter lives in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and she did not come and visit her parents for Thanksgiving, but we had virtual Thanksgiving on Zoom. She lives by herself, and we felt just as connected. The cool thing is I could click Zoom off. So that was fun too. But we really want to talk today about not only how to get students to college. And so my first part is to kind of talk about testing, to kind of give you the truth as somebody who's been the chief student success officer at universities and oversaw advising, academic advising for all undergrads at universities, and kind of saw it through both lenses, right? And some of the business of higher ed and some of the words that are being used. So we're going to talk in the beginning just a little bit about testing, because testing for so many of our students is one of the barriers, right? And we have to understand how universities use these tests beyond just admission. So a little bit about the standards. There's about 30 states in the country that the ACT or the SAT is mandatory and is given as part of the junior test. and that test counts. Y'all probably know that. Those tests, Illinois was one of the first states to require that test because they just entered into a deal with the ACT. Crazy part of it is the ACT's contract ran out and now they're an SAT state, which is strange for a Midwest person to say Illinois is an SAT state because Illinois and SAT don't really go together. But it's no different than Alabama football switching from a Coke-sponsored team to a Pepsi-sponsored team, if that makes sense. So that's just kind of how it worked. Nationally, the national average on the ACT is just above a 2021. That is also the college ready score. The SAT, it's about a 1050. So a 530 sub-score in math. A 530 sub-score in math and a 480 sub-score in writing. For our Black and our Latinx students, those scores are really, really lower. And one of the things that people always say to me is they say, well, Adam, I know, especially people in higher ed, that ACT, SAT is not a predictor of college success for Black, Latinx, API, or Indigenous Native students, but there's some other things that are. So the average ACT score for a Black or a Latinx student in the United States hovers around a 15, always has, or a 17, I'm sorry, and you see the scores there for the SAT. Click. All right, so recently, institutions, put in the chat, give me an emoji if you've heard test optional from a university. Put an emoji up, put it in the chat, put a 1 in the chat if you heard test optional. That's even better, put a 1 in the chat. So we're gonna talk a little bit about this test optional environment, right? And I'm just gonna tell y'all the truth like this is family, okay? Take it or leave it. We're just gonna tell you what we think after generations of being on both sides. So there's some unintended consequences to this test optional movement, right? And unintended consequences. And the first thing I always tell students is that remember, colleges and universities are business just like Kroger, just like anybody else. So their goal is to sell you college. And people say, I don't like to think about college as a business. Oh, okay. Well, then you're gonna struggle, right? Because if you can't pay, you can't stay, no matter how good of a student you are, right? So test optional, for most schools, we're going to generalize, is really for admission only. So that doesn't mean that ACT and SAT are not considered for the merit-based scholarships that you get on admission, which those are the big dogs, right? That's that big money. It's not the AKA scholarship. It's not the Boys and Girls Club. It's not the small local scholarships. It's those big ones that combine ACT, class rank, and GPA. Right? That the school automatically gives you if you're admitted. So for most schools, test optional does not apply to scholarships, merit-based scholarships. It also doesn't apply to placement, in particular in math, right? It also doesn't apply to admission to competitive majors. So when we say competitive majors, y'all know STEM, right? Architecture, sometimes business, nursing, my gosh, is the most competitive earliest on, right? There was a day that pre-med majors that weren't as academically strong became nurses. Now you have to be academically stronger to be a nurse because a pre-med can get some time to figure it out. Not the same way. So there's some potential impact that researchers have found, and historically marginalized, minoritized first generation students, when they hear test optional, they hear test not important, right? So different if you're my kids or you're Christine's kids or Greg's, right? We're saying, well, I don't care what they're saying out here. I don't care that you heard test optional. We're gonna prep you even more. Let's go, because we're still competing, right? This is like preparing for the NFL draft, the combine. I need you to run the fastest time you can run, right? And so that's money. And people whose parents have means understand that. They understand it now more than ever because we're in the middle of a global economic crisis. But if you're someone like me who I registered for the ACT on my own, I took it because I was a college football player. I took it the day after a game on a Saturday morning. I got the score I needed to go to Drake University and I just went, right? My mom was like, where are you going? That kind of thing, right? So I would have heard test not important. So it's really created a Hunger Games for admission. It's also created a Hunger Games for admission and dollars. So when I talk about the perpetuation of privilege, right, with some of this opportunity to take tests and get the best prep and these best opportunities, and parents that know where the line is forming before it even forms, that's the reality of where we are, right? It isn't just Uncle Becky from Full House cheating to get her kids in college. It still is harder because I have the resources to tell my kids where to look for that buried treasure, if that makes sense, okay? Then the final pieces are some of the potential impacts, right? When those first gen students hear it's not important, or they hear, you know, then all of a sudden you aren't taking the test 3 or 4 times, you may only take it once. You may not take it at all, and you may be that kid that Christine and I know with a 3.5, or the valedictorian in their high school who's got an ACT composite of, I don't know, an 18 or a 19. Right? And that happens all the time. But because I get into Akron, why should I even try to test a few more times where if maybe you did that, you could improve your score? So it's really a way, and not that colleges and universities are businesses, but it's a way for people to admit folks to their school without giving them a coupon. Does that make sense? Everybody get that? So that's kind of how it works. So quickly, we wanted to talk about the stuff that's really important. You all, as mostly high school educators, parents, those kind of folks, your goal isn't just to get students to college. It's great that they go, right? You don't want to be me and get kicked out of 2 schools and then have to go to a 3rd and take that long to figure it out. You want them to go and stay and graduate in the least amount of time possible, with the least amount of debt possible, with the most impactful degree possible, so that they can pay off their debt and support their families and our nation, right? So retention, when we talk about that from a college standpoint, that's fall to fall. First time fall to first time fall. So whenever that is, you could be a traditional age freshman, 18 years old, you enroll that fall. What is the percentage of students that come back the next fall at the same institution? So when universities talk retention, that's what they mean. Some people mess it up, right? But that is what they mean. That's what the federal government and most states measure. Persistence is students who start and return to a college or university at a different place. So it might not be the same institution, right? They may start at the University of Tennessee and then go back to home to Nashville and go to Nashville State. They're persisting, right? So persistence is over time. Graduation is measured in 4 and 6 year increments. So when you hear a graduation rate of an institution, usually that's the 6 year number, right? Because there's so many majors, it takes 6 years. They're 6 year programs, they're meant to be 6 years, right? The national 6 year graduation rate is 59%. So Christine has never been this person, neither has Greg, but I know what a 59 is on a test, and it isn't very good, right? 59 is not a rock star number. So next slide. So throw in the chat what you think out of these things: test score, meaning ACT, SAT, curriculars, GPA, part-time work, high school courses taken. What do you think is the biggest factor, college courses taken, on students' retention, persistence, and graduation in college? So what do you think has the biggest impact on their success out of all these things we're listing? So we got a lot of grits, we got extracurriculars, we got part-time work, we got high school coaches, family support. Ooh, there you go. Grit, resiliency, sports, financial stability. Okay, look at Dan. Okay, Shelly, good job. Grit, high school success, leadership skills, high school courses. So when Grit came out, Christine and I were working in Ohio when Grit became the thing. And a lot of us in higher ed, especially that work with TRIO eligible, first gen low income students, really pushed back on that, right? We really pushed back on this idea of grit because so many of our students already have grit. To come where I come from and go to college where I had to choose between popular and smart, I got a whole bunch of grit and resilience. Sometimes Christine will tell you she has to teach students not to have grit. Like, this major is not for you, honey. We're gonna sit here for 14 semesters and you only have 12 semesters of Pell and financial aid. And because of your grit, sometimes you gotta learn to let go of that pan and trust your coaches and find something else. So very different from my students at the University of Alabama, where only 15% were Pell recipients, where we had to teach resilience and grit for them because they had more privilege. You know, I had Hollywood stars kids and NFL Hall of Famer students. Well, they didn't have as much grit. But the one factor, and somebody said this, that goes across students is that students who are the most successful in college are students that took the hardest courses in high school, even though they didn't have to, if that makes sense. So if you only had to take, back in the day, only 2 years of lab science or 3 years of lab science, or you only had to take 3 years of math, and the student chooses to take additional math, that student is the one that, no matter what their race, gender, location in our country, economic circumstance, or parents' education, those students are the most successful in college. They're the most resilient, they have the most persistence and completion rate. That also applies to students that are involved. Somebody mentioned taking college courses. So if a student elects to take PSEO, that student also has the highest rate, and Christine will tell you with her students at Akron, if they do PSEO, if they are choosing to take another year of calc, if they're even if it's calc at an urban school that AP calc isn't as, or honors calc isn't as hard as at a suburban school, but you still chose to do it. You chose the harder path. Does that make sense? So that's what a lot of the higher ed success researchers say about success. So some quick things about testing as we continue to talk about. So the benchmarks are listed here. I'm not going to read them to you, but these are the benchmarks that ACT and SAT that have done huge amounts of studies into success. So for example, if a student has a 22 subscore on the ACT in math, they have a 50% chance, and they've tracked these students for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They have a 50% chance of having a B or higher in the corresponding course, okay? That doesn't matter what their race is, what their gender is, what their orientation is, what any of it is, their financial circumstance. If they have a 22 or better in math, they have a 75% chance to be getting a C or greater in math in college. So it does matter. Same thing on the SAT, right? Several schools do super scores. We aren't really going to talk about it, but super scores are not composites. Super scores are taking the best sub score that you've gotten. If you take the test 5 times, it's taking the best math from test 1, if you have the best reading from test 2, the best science from test 3, and combining them together to make a super score. So with that student, again, if you are first generation low income, you're not going to take the test multiple times. You're not going to see the value. There is a hustle behind super scoring, because Christine's going to tell her daughters, well, honey, you didn't do good in science this time. Let's just go take the ACT this time and just do science. Let's just try to kill science. Then we come back and just do math, and we climb the ladder that way, essentially, right? So the final piece, a couple more pieces that I have, placement rates. So universities, we said, use these tests for placement, right? In math and science specifically. Now, yes, do universities use AccuPlacer and these other things? They do. But y'all know high school students better than I do. And if somebody says, well, we can just use your ACT sub-score, you can do this test, what you gonna say? I'm gonna say, look, just use my test. I'm not going to do this thing at home or come to campus and do AccuPlacer. So if you have a student who wants to be an engineer, engineering requires Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3 differential equations, right? Right, Christine? Yes? Yes, okay. If you're me, you're starting in college algebra, intermediate algebra, right? So Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3 differential equation, that's 2 years of math. And you have to get a C or higher. C minus does not let you progress, right? So in order to place in that sequence, which is the 4-semester sequences, those are the successful engineers, you have to have an ACT subscore in math of 27. Okay, SAT 640. That's rough, man. So people will admit you to their engineering program because, again, it's a business. And if it takes you longer to graduate, the business gets more money, right? If you're not prepped, hey, you just keep paying for more semesters. Christine deals with a lot of students who start in college algebra or intermediate and built a bridge program to help them get started earlier. Because remember, low income students, we only got 12 semesters of Pell. That includes summer, right? So the worst challenge isn't that we have a student loan debt problem. It's we have a student loan debt and no degree problem, which inordinately affects BIPOC students, right? And Christine is always dealing with students who get to their last year in the engineering program that's already 6 years long and they're out of money because grit and resilience hurt them, where they should have said, no, this isn't for me. And I gotta ask for help. So this is the other way that saying test optional can hurt students, where you all, as the coaches and the practitioners, need to know the game, right? Christine, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thank you, Adam. So one point that I actually wanted to bring up, talking about students that take college credit classes. When you have students that do that, make sure that they are getting a good grade in that class, okay? So I have a lot of students here at the University of Akron that come from a high school that they took classes here at Akron, but they get a C in their classes. And then they start off with their college GPA at a 2.0. 2.0 is already on probation at the university. So if any of your students or you're encouraging them to take college credit classes that are college bearing, make sure that they're at least getting an A or a B, because if they start off their freshman year with a low GPA, it's really difficult to change that 2.0 to something higher already. Unless if they fail the class, then you can retake the class for a change of grade. But a lot of students think, oh, great, I'm taking college classes, I'm just gonna get C's, get degrees. Not necessarily, not all majors. So make sure you're coaching your students about college credit classes and their GPA. So
Christine, let's quickly, before we pivot to this, there's a couple of questions in the chat.
Okay.
Make sure we get to. So let me grab those. We'll try to answer those and then move on, because this is a really good break point. So one of the questions is, on the West Coast, we're seeing a few of the very large institutions actually phasing out ACT and SAT permanently. Is this happening in other areas of the country?
yes.
The answer is yes. The answer is it's good and bad, right? Because again, we already said, you have to understand nobody goes on a car lot thinking that the guy selling the car cares about you. Look, he's just trying to sell me a car. I got to work a deal. But in higher ed, we forget, because K-12 is a different business. K-12 is part of a community. You see those people, they're in the community, they're with us. Community college system is different, but 4 universities, Ohio State, Alabama, Tennessee, you don't get Roll Tide and all of that by not wanting money, right? I mean, we just played a college football season, right? So we just have to know the whys. So if you know the why the university is doing that, then that's fine. Somebody asked me when I was speaking at a conference, they said, so Mr. Smith, I heard that the ACT and SAT discriminate against students of color. The tests, not the organizations, the companies. And I said, not really. And they said, well, is there a link between student success and test score for minority students? Because I heard there wasn't. Well, there isn't a link between student success and test score for minority students, but there is a link between student success and math course tracking. So if you're in a remedial course, and remedial for an engineering student is college and intermediate algebra, your chances of success are dramatically reduced. So it's just about how you ask the question and how you mine the data, if that makes sense. So there is a huge link between student success and for minority students and placement, right? But it isn't solely because they're minority. It's because they placed into these courses. So I don't think, this is Adam Smith's opinion, I don't think nationally, first off, ACT and SAT are monsters, okay? They're like Coke and Pepsi. They're huge. They got their business in everywhere. I don't think that that's ever going to happen, that large scale universities around the country phase it out. In particular, because not just because of the standing of ACT and SAT, but even more because I've never seen anything that the privileged beat working class and poor people at that we get rid of. Does everybody get that? As long as the privileged keep getting 32s and perfect scores on the SAT because they can buy the best prep and the best tutors and the best training, what's the reason to get rid of it? Right? That it just, I don't see it happening. We would have to have a huge culture shift. I've never seen anything in this nation, from healthcare all the way down to educational things, that the privileged weren't getting an advantage at, that we just got rid of it to help people who are like me, or from Christine's student from Appalachia, right, whose dad works at Dollar General. So that's just my thought, my opinion on it. Christine, anything on test score that you can think of?
Just thinking about math placement, test scores are used for math placement. Again, talking about the engineering student or the STEM student, the student is still going to have to take a math test regardless when they come to campus. So again, it's a moneymaker. So I really don't know if they are going to get rid of it. I know we live in a COVID world, and a COVID, I think universities are doing the best that they can, but they are moneymakers. So I don't know if it's going to go away 100%. Akron, they're talking about it, but then when we talk about it in our meetings, it's like, really though? So, and it's not talking about scholarship opportunities. There's merit-based scholarships based on obviously GPA and ACT scores coming into the universities. So it impacts a lot.
Well, and it gets to Dan Turner's question, right, about advising. Because the challenge is, then if you got rid of those scores wholesale, how would you measure student against student?
Right.
Because honors algebra at North Canton Hoover, where my daughter went, could be really different than honors algebra at Boylan Central Catholic in Rockford, right? So you can't, GPA is hard because it even within the same building in the same high school, those courses are different. It just depends on who the teacher is. We drilled down to the point of, the program that Christine and I built at Akron that has an 85% STEM graduation rate with predominantly first-gen low-income students. Nationally, the STEM graduation rate is 45%. Christine's shop, 85%. Okay. And part of that is the coaching and the support and the belonging and all of this stuff. And they give a scholarship to the students, hundreds of them, but it is recruiting and finding the high school, even down to the teacher we have, Christine, right? That this biology teacher at this high school, it isn't a coincidence that these students from Midview High School all become engineers. So it's recruiting like a football coach. There's something about that high school coach that gives those students the qualities necessary to be successful, regardless of where they're from, right? So yes, I think, Dan, advising from a university standpoint is a whole different ballgame. It's so different depending on where you are and how you are. If advising, just using the term advising, students really struggle with who that person is. So we really worked to call those people coaches. If they were going to actually be coaching and referring and supporting and cheering for students, internal, external referral, holistic types of things. Okay, so Christine, go ahead and we'll take some more questions, as I'm sure your stuff will generate more, please.
Sure. So some of the keys when you're helping your students go to the next step is look for institutions that have bridge programs. So again, talking about STEM majors and engineering majors. If a student is behind in the math, bridge programs like the one that Adam created, he keeps saying it's me, but he started this program. support students in the summer, right? So it's creating that running start from the summer before fall semester. So bridge programs were created to help students with college credit, whether it's math or an elective course, but also supporting them in more ways than one, connecting them to different people on campus, having the students live together with other incoming freshmen so that they get that freshman feel on a university campus. And then when they come in the fall semester and they're one out of 20, 30, 60,000 students, they don't feel so lost, right? They already have their bearings. They can walk around campus and know what building they can get food at. You know, they know the residence hall. They obviously know where to get support. So bridge programs were designed to help students from that transition from high school to college. A lot of bridge programs have mentoring pieces. Our program has a mentoring piece where we have tutor mentors that support the students with their math class. So they get the opportunity to meet upperclassmen already and start off on their right foot. So look for bridge programs and connect your students with that. Finding fit and belonging. Adam was talking about being an advisor. Sometimes advisors and college campuses admissions recruiters are very transactional. They're here just to sell you the university and it's all beautiful and yay, blue gold or whatever institution. But it's important for the student to find the right fit and make sure that, hey, do I want to go to an institution that has 20,000 students or do I want to go to Ohio State where it's a city of 60, 70,000 students, right? Where is that student going to find that fit and feel like they belong? When we go recruiting to student Midview, right? So for me, when I came from big city, Miami, Florida, and then I went recruiting with Mr. Adam Smith down to Midview, and it's a small town where it's, you know, all of a sudden you see all these cornfields and boom, there's a high school there, right? We recruit our students specifically and we let them know, go to college campuses. I don't know how we can do it now with COVID, but, you know, look for people that are going to recruit you and help you graduate. Again, from Midview to Akron, that's a very big transition for a student, but are they going to fit here or are they going to go fit at Ohio State where it's again 60,000 students? So make sure that your students are asking those questions and you are asking the questions too to the admissions counselors and people that are going to your institution, to your high schools, and are giving the students the right information and not just selling you the school, okay? Because it is very easy for our students to get lost their first year as freshmen. With a web of support before student issues arise. So here in our program, like Adam was talking about, we have a very good retention and graduation rate, but it's because a lot of us have been in those shoes. So me as a first generation student, my parents always told me, you have to go to college, but they didn't tell me how, okay? My parents went to some school in Columbia, but then they hustled and moved us to Miami and they were like, you just gotta go. I had no idea what FAFSA was. I had no idea what financial aid was. I barely graduated high school. I barely got the Bright Future Scholarship in Florida. I had no idea, but my parents just said, go. And I was like, okay. So these are very important conversations to have with our minority students, right? They don't know who to talk to, but then once you find somebody at the university, grab onto that person. So our staff, we know how to coach our students. We know how to talk to them and say, hey, look, I've been here for a while and I've seen these issues. I've also lived these issues. So let's make sure that we connect you with the right people from the beginning, because I know some of the issues are going to come up eventually. Filling out the FAFSA, right? Your parents maybe don't know how to fill out the FAFSA, but we have people that can connect you and we can support you with that. I think a big piece is also being authentic with your students and your families. And once you let students know who you are from the beginning as a professional on a college campus, they will really be able to trust you and they will let you know, okay, look, something's going on, because they can trust you. So I think that's really important. Leaving home versus feeling alone and imposter syndrome. Especially with our Latino students. I can remember with my mom, I went to FIU, so I lived at home and I commuted to campus. I was very involved on campus. I was not the best student, I'll be real, but I did get involved with a lot of extracurricular activities. And my mom would always tell me, she's like, quédate en la casa, like stay home. What are you doing? You need to be here at home and help me with your sister and help your dad and things like that. I'm like, Mom, but this is part of being a college student. So now whenever I meet any, Latinx families, I have to recruit the mom, the abuela, the tia, whoever, the auntie. I have to help recruit the family member and let them know that, yes, I am going to take care of your baby. Okay. I know living on campus for the summer for 8 weeks is going to be very difficult for the mother to let go of their child or whoever it is right at home. But it's a process where we have to make sure to connect the families with the program and obviously the student with the program, right? For a lot of our students, they have never been told that they can do this. They've never been told that, or maybe they're the best student, right? So they are the valedictorian at their high school, right? And then they come on campus and all of a sudden they're one of the 100 students here on campus. Like, oh my God, I'm not the best student. So that's where imposter syndrome comes, like, can I really do this? Am I really meant to be an engineer? So especially in our minority students and our Black and brown students, we have to make sure that we have people on campus that are connecting with them and talking to them, letting them know, yes, you can do this. Imposter syndrome is real. One of my other mentors said, don't feel like you don't belong in the room. You do belong in the room. And we have to continue to coach and mentor our students. So another example, our engineering students, a lot of them, as they start getting up, our Black students, as they start getting up in their engineering classes, they become one of the few or the only. So it can be very discouraging for them to be in a differential equations class or a dynamics class where they're the only student of color and they don't have any support. So it's important, again, to connect them with offices like ours or other people in different universities that can connect and support them and be like, hey, man, it's okay to feel like you don't belong, but you do belong. Remember your why. Why did you start from the beginning? So we always connect them back to that. Seeing the need for help and being willing to ask. So in our communities, airing our dirty laundry is not really something that we do. Going to therapy is not something that we do. It's something that is looked down upon because, el que dirán, like who's gonna, oh my God, so-and-so's talking to so-and-so. Our students don't ask for help. They just don't because they've done it for so long, right? They're the ones that were helping out at home. They had that second job after school. They were part of the football team and the cheerleading team, and then they had that extra job and they were able to do it and they got to college. But it's important, again, for the staff at the university to be authentic with the student from the beginning so that the student is able to ask for help and be willing to ask for help and say, hey, look, I need some support, and it's important for the staff to also be able to let them know that we're here for them and to let them know it's okay to ask for therapy. Therapy is a good thing, especially during COVID times. I cannot tell you how many of my students right now online are struggling, as I'm sure you guys know. Depression is up, anxiety is up, people taking medication is up. So it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay for us to tell our students and their families that it's okay to go get some support and help. When grit and resilience goes too far, Adam can tell you how many students we've had that are working 2 jobs and they just think they can do it all. One of our scholars who is actually married to one of our colleagues who works with us right now, this man had jobs in the evenings, would go to school during the day, would come into our office with his dirty boots and everything. And I don't know how this man did it, but he did it. He is out there. But really, at the end of the day, he suffered, right? Emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you're suffering because you're burning the candle at both ends. So it's important for the universities to be honest with the students and let them know, hey, let's slow down a little bit and don't work that job right now. Or tell your mom that you cannot take care of your siblings right now because you need to work for your school and your grades, because your name is on your transcript, not your parents, not your job that you have right now working at McDonald's or wherever. You need to make sure that you are putting yourself first and going to school and taking care of that first.
One thing to throw in there, Christine, I think where Dan's question about advising, I can tell you that whatever word you use, advising, coaching, counseling, mentoring, teaching, whatever it is, you have to be honest and genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Students, no matter how old they are, they're like drug sniffing dogs. They can smell through it. They can smell fear. They can smell it. Don't say you care if you don't. When I say to students, I love you, they're like, Adam, love me. And I tell you, Christina, I tell them crazy stuff. I mean, I've broken a lot of dreams, but I always started with, I love you. You know, I love you. So I'm going to tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Students can tell that, especially Gen Z. Okay. There was this huge push that when people were pushing back, when I started working in student success, when we would say intrusive advising, when we would say group scheduling, when we would say all of these things, right? And people were like, well, no, they want to do what they want to do. No, that's Gen X, when we just had MTV and a few TV channels, right? Young people now get real anxious. They would love, when I was at Alabama, they would say, Mr. Smith, just pick all my classes for me so I don't have to worry about it. You know, all of that kind of stuff. So helping build some of that emotional maturity, but also developing the relationship enough where advising comes in, where you can tell them. I advised at Alabama, I advised all of the pre-health majors. So they all wanted to be doctors. A lot of women of color, young women, and they were excellent students in high school. But when I'd ask them, why do you want to be a doctor? They would say, well, I want to help people. And it would come down to McDreamy on Grey's Anatomy. And I'd be like, so is that a doctor? I mean, that's Grey's Anatomy. And not seriously, but the funny part was we turned a bunch of those students into public health majors. Now, that was before a global pandemic and before people knew what public health was. Now they're leading the public health revolution in this nation and in this world. But you have to be willing to say to them early on, honey, this isn't for you. You shouldn't be working this hard and still getting C's or B's in freshman bio. You just shouldn't. Otherwise, you can do that at the community college. But why pay all this money for the Roll Tide and you don't get Roll Tide? You don't get to go to football games or be in sorority because all you're doing is studying. So I think that's where you all, especially our high school colleagues on here, you don't hand them to an institution, you hand them to a person.
Yes.
Or a program.
Yes.
You need to develop the relation. It doesn't matter what's on the front of the sweatshirt. It really doesn't. Y'all don't know where I went to college, right? What matters is the people that were there at Concordia University in Wisconsin that knocked on my door when I skipped a class, that held me accountable, that let me be myself and belong on campus. Those relationships are key. Sorry, Christine.
No, it's fine. Talking about nursing students, I have so many students that come into my office and I ask them, I'm like, okay, are you ready to wipe butts? Are you ready to, how do you deal with bodily fluids? And then the ones that are like, ugh, I'm like, sweetie, this is not for you. I don't know who told you that nursing was the best thing for you, talking about family members, especially in our, minority populations. Everybody says, oh, you have to be a doctor, you have to be a lawyer, be a nurse, because that's where the money comes from. You can't deal with blood. You're not going to be a nurse. I don't know what to tell you. So I think it's very important to be honest with your students from the beginning and let them know this is where it comes. And then also, like Adam was talking about with nursing majors, that is such a tough major. You have to be a good student. You fail anatomy and phys one time, you're in the 5-year program here at UA. I don't know, you're competing with other people that are going to be that much better. So it's definitely talking and having those real life conversations with students, especially if they're in a STEM major alignment, talking about that is it your dream or is it your parents' dream that you're here in school? Well, I have a student that he is Nepalian and his mom said he's going to be a doctor when I met him in, I don't know, Summer Bridge 4 or 5 years ago. And I was like, okay, mom. I think I might have broken mom's dreams because he is definitely not a doctor, but it's really having those in-depth conversations with students and letting them know that we're here for them and we're here to support them, especially talking about finances. I remember one year, I don't know if you remember this, Adam, we were here for a Nuru weekend. So Nuru weekend is the weekend right before fall semester starts. The university turned off the air. So I'm here dripping sweat, hair up in a bun, sweating, just sweating, talking to a student in my office. And this student had done orientation, they'd been moved in on campus, and I'm looking at her financial aid and I'm like, honey, you can't afford to be here. You owe a bill for this semester and you're going to owe a bill for spring semester. So when you're working with your students, like Adam just said, make sure you're handing them off to a staff member, somebody that can be real with them and honest with them. Admissions counselors, we got to love them. We need them because we're, an institution and we got to bring in students. But these are not just numbers on paper. These are people. This is their life, financially, morally, ethically, spiritually. How can I let the student be at this university when they cannot afford it? They're going to struggle. So definitely having information, talking about money right now. So we're talking about our DACA students. The laws are changing. The realities of funding is that it's a growing population of students and the laws are changing right now. Every state is different. So I saw a lot of different people. I saw Colorado, I saw Virginia, I even saw somebody from Canada. Welcome. Make sure that you're looking and figuring out what your state and laws are, because everybody sees DACA students differently. The biggest thing that I would like for you to take is, just because a family speaks Spanish, just because a parent speaks Spanish, or that they're Latino, does not mean that they are undocumented. And especially in our community, it's about finding that one person that you can connect with, because once you hear one good thing or one bad thing, that spreads like wildfire in our community. So for me, I'm one of the few people that does speak Spanish here at the university. So I get tons of questions about everything and everybody assumes that I know everything from DACA. But when I don't know, I say, I don't know, and I will get back to you, and I make sure to follow up with the student. So I have a perfect example. I have a scholar in our program right now, and his cousin, parents are undocumented, but his cousin wanted information about being at the university. So fortunately, I was able to help him. He is a DACA student, and here at UA, students can pay in-state tuition if they have resided in Ohio for X amount of years. But at other institutions or other states, you have to pay out of the country tuition. So it's very important to make sure that you know what institutions are doing for DACA students or undocumented students. The reality is that they cannot apply for FAFSA, so they do not get any federal aid, so they cannot get any loans or Pell or grants. So a lot of these students have to look for different institutions. So maybe they have to go to a community college. A lot of students pay out of pocket. So it just really depends on where you are at, and making sure that if you have a connection with somebody at an institution, that they are supporting your student and helping them.
Well, the key with that, and Christine, throw your email address in the chat.
Sure.
Your personal email, so that people, if people have questions regarding DACA, undocumented status, is a really good point, which you brought up about not assuming. Not all of our undocumented students are Latino. Did y'all know that? There's undocumented white students and Black students and a whole bunch of people. And there's a lot of challenges with these issues, and it depends on the state. I work in Minnesota. I live in Tennessee. Tennessee, it doesn't matter how long you've been here. If you are undocumented, you do not get in-state tuition. You get out-of-nation tuition, right? You don't qualify for the HOPE grant that you get that's paid by Tennessee tax dollars, and you don't qualify for federal money. So you have to find certain institutions here, like Maryville College, that has an Ave Maria program that helps provide funding and belonging community for undocumented students. So those institutions exist. There are also different states, as Christine pointed out, that are more friendly, right? Community colleges often only care if the student resides in the district. And as community college becomes more and more free in our states, that has to be a reality and a pathway. But having those conversations all starts with relationship. And it's really important that you have it. We are going to kick it to just finding their why. What Christine was going to mention about the new normal, right, and I was going to mention, and we'll kind of talk about this. We're really challenging students and all of us to lean into virtual. There are going to be companies, businesses, and people that in our new normal, because there's never going to be when COVID goes away. People say, when COVID leaves, the flu didn't leave, the common cold didn't leave, COVID is going to be here. Now, yes, we'll have vaccinations and we'll have all these things, but the reality is COVID has also exposed weaknesses in our systems that have focused more on the more marginalized and minoritized populations. And so there are things that I have challenged my students and my staff to do, lean into virtual. My team can set, like I said, I work in Minnesota and live in Tennessee. A year ago, y'all would have been, huh? How does that even work? But now you're like, oh, okay. So there are things in how we have embraced this using Zoom, using webinars, all being in space together, 115 of us, right? All in space and in community together that we would have never thought of a year ago. There are things that we have learned about this that are going to create greater access and greater opportunity. But the key is, because I was thinking about my 2-year-old granddaughter the other day, and I was thinking of, well, you know, COVID, and my daughter was saying something about COVID and the kids. And I said, this girl spent half of her life in quarantine. So the kids don't know any better. Some of that is just us and our stuff. We got to let it go, right? We got to let it go and stop being the get off my grass guy and say, okay, this is what the new normal is going to be. Maybe we should have done business differently. Maybe we didn't have to travel to conferences. Maybe we can make learning more flexible. Maybe people don't need to come into an office like Fred Flintstone and work 8 to 5 when they need to be at home sometimes taking care of their families. Maybe we need to care for people holistically in their quality of life. So I think being honest and keeping it real with students, keeping it real with each other, giving people the kind of grace we've given each other through this COVID season where people are on Zoom and people's kids are screaming, the guy was ringing my doorbell. That would have been completely crazy a year ago, especially to my sisters on here and all the women. It would have just been, how dare you have children who have needs? People would have thought that. And now it's like, oh yeah, your kid's climbing all over you, Christine. Good to see you. You know, we're all waving. So that kind of tolerance, I think, is really important. The last piece, and we'll get a chance for some questions, it's really important as coaches that we work with students, Dan, with your question, to figure out their why. I went to college because I grew up and went to St. Louis Park High School outside of Minneapolis, and that's just what you did. Everyone went to college. And I went to college to play football, so it was my what. And so here's a video of a gentleman who is talking about his why and finding his why and knowing the difference between what he's going to do and why he's doing it. So take a look at this video and then we'll talk about it for a second.
Let me talk to the brother right there. Yeah. What's your name, bro?
Daryl.
I'm gonna need you to slow down with all that, bro. For real, you scaring the white people. You can't do that, Daryl.
I'm sorry, bro.
You scaring me too, though. Wow. Well, what do you do for a living, Daryl?
I work at Oak Ridge Military Academy. I'm the music director there.
Musical director at Oak Ridge Musical Academy. Okay.
Yeah.
But you got a deep voice, man. I would not want to get you mad. Jonathan, come here. You're like, oh, snap. 9 Jonathans show up. It's amazing, dude. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Let me hear. We didn't plan this. Just so y'all know, we didn't plan this at all. I'm just randomly talking. Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow.
That bro could sing, you know what I'm saying?
All right. Now, once you give me the version, is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now, right now I'm found, was blind, but now I see.
So the great part about the video, right, is Michael tells Daryl, sing, right? We tell our students all the time, go to college. Christine's parents, go to college. That's what you do, go to college. But we don't tell them why. And we need to, that's part of being a coach. So when Dan asked about being an advisor, I'm like, well, that sounds like an ATM to me. Sounds transactional. But a coach's job is to figure out their why. My daughter coaches Najee Harris. You all know Najee Harris, running back for Alabama? Najee is her student, okay? And the whole offensive line, because her daddy played offensive line. And she's his academic coach. Najee knows his why. He knows why he runs. Did you see Najee hurdle dude from Notre Dame? Did you see Najee run over Ohio State? He knows why he's running. You don't get on the field unless you know why. And so it's okay to tell students it's not your season. Colleges and universities, and I've been this guy, retention at all costs. But it ain't everybody's season. Some people need to drive a school bus in Minneapolis in the blizzard of 1991, like me, to realize why they went to college. And so it's really important for us, especially as costly as this is, as Christine's talking about, people can do detrimental damage to their lives by going to school and not having the money, not having the wherewithal, failing classes, not having it together. So this is not a game. We don't play with this. This is, you better enter into this just like you did in marriage, just like you did when you signed for your mortgage. And if our students don't know why they're singing, we wonder why they aren't encouraged. We wonder why they don't have grit. But it's our job as coaches to help get that why out of them. Not, well, if you're going to go to Ohio State because I love the Buckeyes in football, but you know you can go to the Horseshoe and watch games. So that is really the essence of being an educator, a coach, a teacher, and the number one coaches on this planet are parents, right? Telling them and figuring out, why do you want to study this, right, Christine? We have a student, Christine and I, a student named Nick, okay? This is the last story. Nick, we were getting ready for our summer bridge, and we run summer bridge and we do these info sessions, and students would have to come, and we'd have some after school and we'd have some on Saturdays. And we got to one of them, and it was a Saturday morning, and it's early in the morning, early like 10, okay? Nick, last name Gansler, I will call Nick Gansler out up in this piece. One day, so we're sitting at the event, and it's that Ohio cold. So it's spring, but it's raining like it always does in Ohio, and it's cloudy and it's cold, but the rain isn't snow, right? And I'm talking to all the students, and it was in this hall, and I'm talking to all of them, and one kid sitting by himself, and I said, you know, bro, where's your parents? Nick said, well, I came by myself. Oh, okay, do you need something for parking or whatever? No, I rode my bike. I said, bro, you rode your bike? Like literally rode your bike.
A bicycle.
Bicycle, okay? Not a motorbike. Rain, cold, Ohio, 38 degrees outside in the morning. Nick was from, I'm trying to remember where.
Maslin.
Maslin, yep, because it's Maslin and McKinley football. He's from Maslin, Ohio to Akron, Ohio on a bicycle. You know how far Maslin is? It's got to be 25 miles.
Yeah, it's like a 30-minute drive.
Now, Nick got a degree from the University of Akron. We let him in the summer program because we like, bro rode his bike.
No, he didn't even qualify for the program, Adam. He came into the university in Calc 3. He didn't even
Oh,
qualify for our
did.
program, but this man wanted it so bad. He
Yeah.
wanted it so bad. He rode his bike to our office on a Saturday morning because he wanted the program so bad. And he didn't even qualify. So we just gave him the scholarship. We said, here,
whatever you
here
want.
you go.
Yeah, we'll see you in the fall. That's what we did. We'll see you
That's
in the
what we said.
Now
Physics major
Nick is pursuing a PhD at Oregon State.
in physics. Yep.
He knew his why. Poor kid, rural Maslin, young white man. I mean, just my homie. And it's just crazy. Y'all have those stories. What questions do you guys have that we can answer from you? Here is my website and my information. I can connect you with Christine. She put her information in the chat, but I know we still have some time, right, Greg, for some questions? Questions.
Yeah, no, Adam, we are running a little bit long, but there are no webinars scheduled for after this, and you still have a lot of people who are interested to hear what you both have to say. So I'm not going to stop early. You guys can keep going.
Okay. All right. Cool. Cool. Yeah, because we get a little church up in here. I have a theology degree, y'all. Theology, and I think it's different in this business because for us, for Christine, myself, this is our calling. This is our ministry. I do this on the bus, right? I do this at the grocery store. So it doesn't really change. And finding those people are so important. So Kelly's questions. I work for TRIO Programs. She works for ETS. Nope, Kathy. I'm sorry, Kathy. How do we get parents on board with students going to college? Oh, Christine, you want to take it? How do you get parents engaged?
That is, so I used to work in a high school and I used to be a therapist, and I did with LGBT students or clients, and I did such good work with them in the room. And as soon as I walked them out to hand them off to the parent said one thing and boom, the kid just fell. And I'm like, we did such good work. The parents, now I'm a mom, the parents are definitely important, especially with our minority students, right? Our Latino students, our Black and Brown students. We have a diversity visit day and the family comes, and most of the time I'm talking to the mom more than I'm talking to the student. So you make them, definitely the mom or auntie, whatever, whoever, dads are important too. But you have to sell them that they are going to be taken care of at the university. So with TRIO programs, a lot of our parents unfortunately are not engaged, right? With COVID, it has shown that the parents are not engaged because they have to work. Like, we have to let them know that going to college can open doors for the students. They don't have to right now if that's not something that is in the cards for them due to financial reasons. But for our minority students, going to college is going to open doors. I'm opening doors for my children and my children's children because of the degrees that I have and because of what I have been able to do, right? My sisters don't have college degrees. I'm the only one that went to college and got a master's degree. So it's about telling the parents that it can open doors and that you have to trust the student and let them go and be able to make some of their own decisions, because as a parent, you've got them this far, and trust that whoever you hand them off to, hopefully you find somebody at the university that you can do a handoff, is coaching them and mentoring in the right way. Because sometimes we as parents want the best for our kid, but when they get to a certain age, we don't know exactly what we're doing because maybe we haven't been there. Right. So I think that's part of it.
And I think that's spot on, Christine. Kathy, I would say, started my career in AmeriCorps community organizing in neighborhoods, in the straight up hood, right? I've never met a parent that didn't want more for their kids.
Right.
So we need to stop putting our middle class, highly educated idea of more on other people. You know, hey, you have to come to the school and come to parent-teacher conferences, otherwise you don't love your kid. These parents are they're a frontline freaking work.
Yes, yes.
Right? I mean, so the same grace we want, we have to be willing to give, right? because I have never met, I grew up in an abusive household. My mom worked 3, 4 jobs. She never went to visit a school with me. She said, where are you going? You're gonna go here? Okay, yeah, go. That didn't mean she didn't want more. She didn't know what more looked like. She didn't know why more was important. That's why TRIO's been here since 1965. That's your job, right? Not assuming that the parents don't want their kids to go to college, because we know that oftentimes parents are the biggest stumbling block, families, communities, between our students and success. But at the end of the day, acknowledging that that's your job, to understand that the parent wants more for their child, they just don't know what that looks like, right? And meeting them where they are, teaching the parent, but equipping the student with the armor of no is also a really important thing. So the student can say, no, I'm not gonna come home for break. No, I'm not gonna come and translate for this event. No, I have to study. No, I gotta keep going to school. No, I'm not gonna work. I'm not gonna quit school like my cousin who's a dentist had to do. His mom wanted him to quit school. So when my uncle passed away, so he could work to support the family, he said, well, how much money do you need, Mom? He had a mentor who told him that. Found out how much money, and he would come home on the weekends and earn that money delivering pizzas, give it to his mom and go back to school, okay? So it's our job as people who have run through the hole, so to speak, and got the scars to prove it, to give our students the strength to understand that their parents are on their side, the parents just don't know. So just because you don't know why going to college is important, why would you? I didn't know why going to Disney World was so great until I actually went. I was like, wow, that's amazing. And now I know why people go. So I think once the parents do that, they can be an asset and an ally to us and a support to us in our work. But that's our work. Like Dan said, we're not advisors, ATMs, we're relational people. And so loving on the parents and the community and the family is critical in doing that. Thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Adam, one of the questions that came up earlier was, how is it best to connect students to bridge programs? Do you have advice for how a student could seek that out, or what the best advice would be to possibly look at that considering schools?
Yeah, so a couple questions that you ask admissions counselors, right? Admissions counselors. Always told students this when I worked in TRIO, Miss Kathy, so I'm a TRIO guy. Always told students to ask the admissions people, so what are you gonna do when I screw up? And see them stutter and stammer, right? What do you mean? Well, we have this, we have that. No. I need to know where the lifeguards are before I go in the pool. Before I go scuba diving, Christine's a scuba diving guru, right? Before I do that. So I think it's your job to ask the admissions people, what are the support services that are there for my student? And I don't want some canned answer like we have a counseling center and we have tutoring, right? What I want is, what are the intrusive, supportive, holistic, structured things that I can hand this student to, because they're gonna come to you. And if you have the schools, we were walking the hall at Kent Roosevelt High School about 10 years ago when we were recruiting, and there were 2 girls in the hall, and I said to them, well, why don't you come to Akron? And they said, well, we want to, my mom went to Kent, and Kent Roosevelt's literally across the street from Kent State, big rivalry. And I said to one of the girls, but has Kent tried to recruit you? Like, do they want you? And she said, well, I'm sure they'll take, but what makes you think they're going to work hard to keep you when they didn't work hard to get you? Does that make sense? And so obviously Militia now has a biomedical engineering degree and from the University of Akron, and her mom has 3 degrees from Kent State. But it was more about the relationship and the people that's important. So finding, I don't know if there's a clearinghouse for these things. The other big advice, Miss Kathy was on here, our ETS TRIO staff person. If you are working with first generation low income students, find an institution that has a TRIO program called Student Support Services. Funded under the Department of Education, they will have support for those students automatically. And you can just search the Department of Education's TRIO webpage. They will have every single funded institution in the country.
They will also, if you look at a universities, for example, FSU just popped to mind. If you look up first, like first year programs, and then they will list, support for first year students, and they will tell you summer bridge, different things like that. So just look at first year programs for students, and a lot of it will be tied to a freshman 101 course, things like that. So, but the summer bridge, summer opportunities, look for things like that. Some of them do come with scholarships, some don't. It just depends on the institution, but first year experience programs.
Thank you all. And I think it's really important. I'm a big fan of mandatory and required and structured.
Yes.
So a school that says, well, they can pick what they want and they can do what they, that just don't work. It does not work for this generation. It didn't work for my generation. I just thought I needed something different. I wanted to do what I wanted to do. Structured mandatory worked for me. Structured mandatory works for Christine's program. Structured mandatory worked at Bama when I went, Tennessee, every place I've been. Students respond to that. To them, that feels like love. I call it swaddling. That's the reason why babies like to be swaddled, because they don't want to feel all this air. And so students feeling this and feeling hugged feel cared about. That feels like structure. Telling them they can do what they want when they want to do it, it just feels like you don't love me. And so finding the places that will create structure, learning communities for your students is imperative to their success, especially this generation.
That's awesome. So I know, Adam, you and both Christine come from a lot of experience in working with students. Let's say that there's somebody listening here that hasn't quite taken that first step to start to connect with students or kind of help them guide to where they want to go. Is there any advice that you would give to teachers who are maybe just starting out, or maybe they're starting to find the kind of the walk of the life that you both are in and finding that passion? How would you kind of recommend starting out and doing that?
So my thing is a little more random for teachers, K-12 teachers. My other daughter teaches 7th grade. God bless her, 7th grade boys in Louisville, Kentucky. I saw Louisville on here earlier. I would say the first step, and Christine will have some more tangible things, but I would say wearing your college gear one day a week. See, education, especially K-12, is the only profession that people don't put their credentials on the wall. Get your stuff on the wall. You've earned that. Right? You walk in the doctor's office, all you see. You walk in a lawyer, business person's office, it's all you see. You are credentialed, but your students they're shocked to even see you outside of the school building. I remember when I was shocked to see my teacher at the grocery store. I thought she lived at the school. So it's important for you to be an ambassador for your institution. So if you went to Towson State, wear your Towson stuff. They should know I went to Towson. At some point, a student's going to say, so, Mr. Johnson, can you tell me about Towson? You love you some Towson, don't you? Right? Just so they see you as, because remember, we think, just like on Facebook, we think everything we post, everyone sees. We think we are the center of the universe for these students. They don't even remember. We used to, when we ran advising at Alabama, we do new student orientation for all of our students. Then they would come in at the start of the semester, just as students do. And somebody would always ask at the front desk, so who's your advisor? Who's your coach? And they would never remember. So we started making and then we would say, was your coach a man or a woman? They didn't remember. That's how insignificant we are to them, right? And I would say, ooh, that's deep. And we'd say, is your coach black, white, Latina? I don't remember. Then we started making sure our coaches wore t-shirts of different colors and developed teams where they had lays. And so Christine was a part of the yellow team, Christine?
Yellow for a while, I'm green now.
Christine was you're green now. Okay, so the students then would see the color and they would say, I was on the green team and we were the green elephants for orientation. So that kind of visual reinforces to them who we want, how we want them to see us. And so if Christine is wearing her Florida International University gear and she's always in her blue and gold on Fridays and she's doing that and they're like, oh, FIU, well, tell me about how, and if her diplomas are up and they see she has an undergrad in this and she has an MSW, well, all of a sudden they start seeing her as a college coach. Very different And those are really simple things that you can do.
I was gonna say the same thing. You guys are just seeing my office and it's the boring part, but if I turn this around, it's an explosion of things. Okay, so representation matters, right? Going back to the beginning, right? What's going on in our country, representation matters. So even if you guys are virtual, you know, changing your screen to, yeah, maybe on Fridays, it's Blue Gold Fridays for FIU or whatever it is, right? So it's important to make your office space welcoming to students. So things that represent you, represent the university that you went to, or different things like that, you know, like the pride flag, LGBT, for undocumented students, the butterfly, it's somewhere around here in my explosion of things, but it's important. Representation matters. So make sure that your office spaces are welcoming to students. And then talking to, you know, if you're just starting off right now, like Adam talked about your why, have students do like a quick 5-minute reflection. Why are you here and where do you want to go? And then talking about that and figuring out if college is something that they want to do or they don't want to do, or maybe they want to go to a trade school because they really like to tinker with things. And in a COVID world, they've been at home breaking down their computer and building it back up, right? So making sure to talk to students about their why and being open and honest with what your why was and why you are here now. I have a lot of students that are STEM students and they are not very open like I am, and I can just talk to a wall and say hi to anybody. So also being comfortable with a little bit of silence and being uncomfortable with that too. And that's okay to sit in that silence for a little bit, and talking about yourselves and letting them know that you care. So that's what I would say.
I think, Greg, the final piece to this is what Christine was talking about therapy, about counseling. I'll use an Ian Van Zandt. We all need to be doing our work, right, on ourselves. And so a former colleague of mine that worked with Christine, worked for us, was said to me one day, and he had degrees in higher ed from top institutions, he still has them, undergrads from top institutions, and would walk around with a clipboard and had it all and he studied it and this is what it is. And he said to me, Adam, everything that you do to build programs and work with students and build a culture of success on campus is kind of contrary to what I learned. How do you get students to respond? And I said, I'm vulnerable. Like, I will tell you about my journey. I will tell you about my childhood. I will tell you about getting a 0.86 at the University of Wisconsin. I will tell, because students relate to that vulnerability. I'm just people like you. I'm the same guy who decides if you stay in this school or not is the same guy who got kicked out of school when he was 19. So I think you can't be equipped to do the work at the level you want to do it. Christine in her coaching business and personal trainers and fitness coaches and all these, you can't do the work unless you're actually walking the journey yourself. You just have to be a rung higher on the ladder than they are. And it has to be, I'm just people. But if you aren't doing your work on you, it's really hard for you to have the kind of vulnerability and stop wearing the mask that students or anyone responds to. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
A large part of what I heard today was awareness. Be aware of the standards you're being measured at. Be aware of where success lies and where you want to be on that line. Setting goals, you know, the awareness of how to get there. And what I like that you just kind of tied in is understanding yourself, the awareness of how you kind of fit into everything and how that things make you feel. It's huge. And that's not a conversation you hear with a lot of students. I think across all cultures. So Adam, Christine, thank you so much. I think thank yous have been coming up in the chat for the past 20 minutes. I mean, you guys have changed lives today, I feel, and the information you've provided has been fantastic. Is there any closing piece that you would like to? I know you said lastly, but I know you.
I say lastly a lot.
One more nugget.
Yeah, there's no lastly with Adam.
No. I have a theology pastoral ministry degree. The key is, if you think this is good, next week's going to be better.
Students are always better.
Please. These are hitters, okay? These young people, and they will be honest and they will tell you the truth, okay? And so if you are watching and you don't have, or you're watching this recording and you don't have colleagues, friends, acquaintances, high school students, people, college students that haven't registered, make sure you attend next week. Because yeah, Christine and I, but listening from the mouth of these students from all around the country is going to be really valuable. And if you want to learn how to do this, they may not teach you how to do it, but they'll tell you how not to do it. And that's really, really the powerful nugget. So I think you all, InfoBase, creating this venue for us to have real conversations with students and Christine and with all our colleagues nationwide. I'm indebted to y'all. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Christine, do you have any final words? I know I'm asking to say, I know. There's lots of advice, but.
Just, again, thank you for spending time with us today. And remember that you are important to take care of yourself, mind, body, and soul, because if you're not taking care of yourselves, you cannot take care of your students. And it's important to ask for help as well and be able to ask for help. So
Awesome.
That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Thank you both again. Thank you everybody for sticking around. I know that we went over a little bit late, but when you have golden knowledge, you want to keep it rolling. So please come back next week. Share this with your friends. I know that Adam's active on social media. So please continue to follow him if you do. If you don't, please start. We will look forward to next week. Adam, Christine, have a great evening. Everybody, thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.